Hello, welcome to Chapter 3 Podcast, the show for readers of science fiction, fantasy, and romance. This is season 2, episode 30. Today, me and Leanna are here to discuss The Wisdom of Crowds by Joe Abercrombie. And it is our very first time doing this as an actual live stream. So we are testing this out to see how it goes. If things go well, maybe we will do more of this. So, hello.
Hello. I think this will go fantastically because we're just going to be chatting about Wisdom of Crowds, which is amazing. And anyone who's here, they think it's amazing because that's the only option on the multiple choice. So it will go how it will go.
I also have a sick child, so I may have to go off. So, Leanna, why don't you do a little introduction? I will be back momentarily. This is going to be a great live show.
You got it.
Okay.
Well, as anyone who knows me is aware, I'm obsessed with First Law, and I think Wisdom of Crowds is the best, at least technically speaking, the best written. I can't also control comments, so I would put your guys' comments up if I could, but I cannot. So hello, hi, the great change has come and gone, and hi. I finished it this morning. We are going to do spoilers during this chat, so if that's a problem for you, be aware there will be spoilers. We're gonna in the past we've tried to keep it spoiler free in the beginning and then dive into spoilers, so you're safe for the first bit because we'll be just generally in this case gushing, but we will get into spoilers probably pretty shortly, so be forewarned.
Yes, I don't know how this evening is going to go. Like, maybe listen. Like, for anybody else who has small children at home, it can be a challenge, and I have a sick kid who wants me, and so hopefully we'll try to make this work. I don't know.
You have to tell them that they have to be realistic.
Yes, exactly. Well, for everybody watching, this is indeed realism, so I guess it's appropriate for our Wisdom of Crowds show. Hi, everybody. We have some people, familiar faces in the comments, so hello. Hopefully y'all enjoy this. So, Wisdom of Crowds, it was great. This was third time reading for you?
This is my second time reading it.
Okay.
So it came out around this time, or in September of last year. So I read it when it came out last year, and now again. This was my first time rereading it.
Right. How was the experience?
It was good. I was a little nervous because I was like came away reading this one, and when I did my redoing my ranking of First Law, I put this at the top, and after reading it and reviewing it, I was like, this is the first time Abercrombie has made me cry. And then I was like, you know what, maybe I just was so wowed by it because it was recency bias, and because it did, like if something makes you cry, therefore it's good, it evokes an emotional response. So I was like, well, I don't know if I'm going to cry the second time. I know what to expect this time, so I can just kind of like, it's like the first time you go on a ride, like a dark ride, at like Disneyland or something. You're just like, whoa, and then like you go on it a few times, you're like, there's the wires, there's the lighting little box right there. Like you start to like see the seams, and you start to see the flaws. It's flawless. There are no seams. I cried this time as well, even though I knew how it would actually. Sometimes I find that that's actually worse. I'll be like, well, I cried the first time, but I won't cry the second time. A lot of books that have made me cry, I cry worse the second time because the whole time I'm like preemptively upset about what's coming, whereas the first time I didn't know what to expect.
Right.
Like that's happened with a few books where I'm like, the second time I'm a mess like long before it's even happened, because I'm like, now I know that like this is the last conversation they are going to have, which I didn't know would be the last conversation they're going to have because I didn't know that they would die later. So like now I'm like already crying.
But we're not in spoilers yet as to why we're crying.
No, just like in general, books where I'm like, this is like, right. I now know this is the last time they see each other.
Yeah, I can see that. Oh man. Yeah, I was telling you because I know you asked. I didn't cry, but I was sad.
You also don't cry that much in books, right?
I don't. I think if things hit me in particular ways sometimes, but I think with this, I was sort of expecting tragic things to occur
Oh, I
And
think you knew that I had cried when I read it. So
maybe, I think I forgot, but I'm not
the thumbnail for
terribly
my Wisdom of
surprised.
Crowds review is just I cried.
It's a good review. It's a good review.
Yeah.
No, this was fantastic because I know you had really loved it, and I agree. I think it's great. It's really good. I don't also have complaints about it. It is the perfect ending.
All right, well that's it, ladies and gentlemen, we're done.
We're
It
done.
was perfect.
Wrap up and go
Good
home. It's
night.
fine.
Yeah, I mean, I also was worried that like because I had been hyping it for so long, being like, this is the
Right.
best one yet. It's building this. Like you think A Little Hatred's great until you read Trouble with Peace, and then you think you
Mhm.
can't top Trouble with Peace, and then you read Wisdom of Crowds, and it was like she's
Mhm.
gonna be like, well, I mean, it's good, but you kind of ruined it with all of your
No, it is
hype.
genuinely really, really good, and what's interesting about it is that the first part of it, I was feeling a little like, "Okay, I kinda see where this is going," like, and then it took
Do
a turn,
you?
and I was like, "Oh, never mind. I don't I don't
Anytime
know
you
where."
think you know where an Abercrombie book is going, you should know that you're wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was very, very good. I loved it. Mhm.
So non-spoiler thoughts.
Non-spoiler thoughts. Oh boy. Like, j hmm.
I mean, as the conclusion to not only so it's both the conclusion of a trilogy and the conclusion of like a 10-book arc that is begun in the Blade itself. So like that's a lot to stick the landing on, and I think it
Yes,
does.
I think it does too. Uh, yes, which you're right. That's a lot to stick the landing on, and I think he does a fantastic job. It is exactly what I feel like the ending should be, and
While leaving the door open
while
for
leaving the door
future
open for more. But
books.
it's it that but of course, you have to, right? Like, things can't just be neatly
I
wrapped
think
up.
this leaves the door open more so even though than Last Argument of Kings did. Like, Last Argument of
Arguably.
Kings, you're like, well, obviously there's like stuff like the world is ongoing, so like obviously there's more that you could tell in this world. But this book, like it's almost like a Marvel-esque like post-credit scene where you're
Yeah.
like, meanwhile.
Yes. We have a commenter whispering that they don't think it's perfect.
I'll
I
allow a single flaw. What is the single flaw?
you know, let us know. I thought it
But
was great. I really loved it.
but I think this book, again, without spoilers, without specifics, I think this book, though, having read it, you could see why I'm generally pretty insistent that people read the books that came before this first. That you can read this trilogy by itself first and only, but that it is just so much better if you've read everything that came before.
Uh, yeah, I don't know that we, like, entirely agree on this. I think you could start with this trilogy and then go back and read it. I think it would be a different experience, but I don't think it would be a bad
Well,
experience.
for this book in particular, again, without saying, well, we can
Mhm,
argue about the specifics later. But like, I think like with the first two in this trilogy, I would be like, yes, it would be different, but it could be good. But
mhm.
with this one, the way that this one ends, I feel like it would not be as impactful if you don't have previous context.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. That's fair. I can see that. I still
All right,
think, though,
she
that
agrees. I win.
yeah. I
Not that
still
it's a
think, though, that
competition.
you could start
Oh,
with,
I mean, I
you
always
know
say it when like in reading order videos, I'm like, in a perfect world, you read everything in publication order. Okay. But like if not perfect world, one down from perfect world, okay,
Mhm.
you could read The Best Served Cold as a tester and then do everything in chronological order because you've discovered you love it. Or if not that, then you could start with A Little Hatred, read that trilogy, and then go back and read everything in chronological order.
Yeah.
Like I allow it as a possible reading order, but
You allow
not
it.
ideal.
You allow it. Yeah, I agree. The payoff, we have a comment saying the payoff wouldn't be as sweet if you didn't read it in order. I agree, however, I do think that oh, how to talk about this. So I because we're not gonna talk spoilers yet, but I do think that you could if you're somebody who's gonna be bothered by some of the flaws of the first trilogy, I would recommend starting here. You know what I mean? To get you sucked in.
I'll allow it. I already said I would allow it.
We have a lot happening in the comments right now, which is interesting. Somebody who loved it but still thinks Trouble with Peace is better.
Mm.
Trouble with Peace is good, but I personal
Well,
for me, it
I
wasn't.
So yeah, I said in my to my patrons in my Discord that, so am I gonna finish Wisdom of Crowds and still think it was like the best one of the lot? And like, yes and no. Like I
Mhm.
still think that from a technical perspective, this is the best written thing in the First Law. But the one that I would like most want to reread and have the most enjoyment rereading of all First Law books is probably not this one, partly
Hmm.
because I don't want to cry. But like, it's not like the original trilogy like is probably maybe arguably the most flawed of all the books, but like on rereading multiple times, like I have the most fun revisiting those books, whereas this is
Mhm.
like it's kind of like the difference between like, a 3 Michelin star meal and like a box of mac and cheese. You're like, okay, one is very like obviously deserving of awards, but I'm much more likely to eat mac and cheese on the day to day over and over and over and over again. So like the original trilogy is my mac and cheese that I just like, that's my comfort book.
So you're comparing the books to mac and cheese from
Yes.
a box. Good.
Yes.
Mhm. Okay.
Hmm. It's
Should
comfort
you
food.
should tell Abercrombie this the next time you interview him.
He was disparaging his own trilogy to me, and I
Fair
was
enough,
the one
fair enough.
saying, hey, it's pretty good. So I don't think he would disagree.
Gotcha. Okay. Also, I have to say I love Savine. I've been saying that this whole trilogy. She is my new favorite character, closely followed by her parents.
Yep.
So,
The
mhm.
family Galacta is
They are my
pretty
people.
pretty
Listen.
top shelf.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, she's not my favorite. We already
Right,
know who my favorite is,
right.
but I mean, she's exceptionally well written, and she does feel like it's again where like even if she's not my favorite character, just like maybe Wisdom of Crowds isn't like the most fun for me to read,
Mhm.
even if it is the best, because I think Savine is better written than Artie even was in the first trilogy, but do I have more fun going back and reading Artie scenes in the first trilogy? Maybe. Whereas like Savine, I just appreciate like everything that he's doing, from the perspective of like just like narratively it's interesting, and the way that he's grown as a writer to write females better,
Yeah.
and on top of all of that to believably say, okay, Glocta and Artie, what does their kid look like, and to like write
Yes.
someone that's new and it doesn't just feel like, oh, I mixed the two characters I had before together. Like it doesn't, but it's like it is that, but it's completely its own thing. It doesn't just feel like, let me take a bit of Artie and a bit of Glocta and mush it up in a blender and boom, you got Savine. She's like, it's
Mhm.
not that, but there are definitely like elements of both of them in her where she definitely feels like the product of that union.
Yes. Yes. No, I think the character work on her is incredible, and I love the fact that he is able to write female characters like this. I think he's done a really good job. Um,
Cameron Taylor says, would Artie have conquered the circle of the world if she had pearl dust instead of wine, though?
Fair question. Perhaps. Although I don't know. I think there is something to the ruthlessness and strategic mind that Savine has gotten from her father.
Let's say, would Artie have conquered the world if she'd been raised by Galacta instead of marrying him?
Yes, 100%. Yes.
Because I mean, well, Savine benefits from having been raised by someone as scheming as Glocta who could teach her to be that way, but she's
Mhm.
also born into immense privilege. So Artie was not guided by someone like Glocta, nor was she born into wealth and privilege. Savine benefits
Correct.
from both and is the example of like, okay, so there, I guess between Orso and Savine, one is born into privilege and does nothing with it, and the other's born into privilege and is like, I'm going to squeeze every last opportunity out of the advantages that I've been given. Like, there's
Yeah.
being like, that's when, people get up in arms. They're like, oh, I worked for everything that I have. You're like, well, you were born into privilege. But not everyone who's born into privilege, like, makes the most of it. And she certainly makes the most of it.
I would agree with that. I also think that she had fairly great parents. Well, not perfect parents, but like pretty good parents compared to Artie's parents or what we know of
Well,
them.
compared to, it's a very low bar. Artie's
True.
parents is, yeah, she pissed on her father's grave, so
Yeah,
it's not
true.
hard to be better than that.
Yeah. But Savine is like relatively better well adjusted to a certain
Yeah.
extent, you know. Yeah. what else can we talk about that is not spoilery?
Um, well, I mean, I think in general, like I just said about the Savine being her own character, while also very much being a product of characters we knew before. But I mean, a lot of things like that are what make this book so good. And I think that even if the plot would be entertaining for you if you've never read anything before, it's that kind of like an appreciation of like a character like Glocta who like he's around in these books and
Mhm.
he's very much who you remember him to be from the original trilogy, but he is not the same person that he was then, that he is
Yeah.
believably Glocta 30 years later, where he is, what he's doing, how being a father has changed him, like what he's up to, like, and all the characters that are familiar are that way where they feel like natural extensions of like, I mean, Shivers, you've seen the changes, whereas
Yeah.
Glocta, you didn't get to see changes,
Ah,
but like
the
everything
character work
about
is so
this.
freaking good. Listen.
But also the world work, where like the world, if
Yeah.
you jumped from Last
Yeah.
Argument of Kings to A
Mhm.
Little Hatred, you'd be like, the world has changed quite a bit. But like you've seen that progression in these books where like this industrial era that we've entered into feels very earned. And even the changes that happen over the course of this trilogy. So when we start this, it's far more industrial than we were in the First Law trilogy. And by
Yeah.
the end of this, there's been even more change in terms of
Right.
politics and industry and the general zeitgeist. So
Yeah.
like that is also like the setting in the world has as much character development as the characters.
Yeah. All true. All amazingly well done. I one thing that I think might be interesting to talk about is with the predictions I had coming into this book, right? And for the trilogy, I was thinking, okay, we're gonna get maybe more political revolution, French Revolution style, but I wasn't sure how that was gonna happen. And you get thrown right into that basically at
Which
the
is kind
beginning
of
of the
how
book.
revolutions happen. They don't, you
I
know.
mean, yeah, but it's funny because I mean, you're right, it is, and I realized quickly, okay, it makes sense that he's just doing it that way, but I was taken aback at how quickly it all happened. I was like,
You weren't
"Oh,
the only one
okay."
taken aback. Everyone in the Agrion was taken
Yeah,
aback.
like, "Wait, what's happening?" No, 100%, and so I was expecting that, but I wasn't expecting to get thrown into it as quickly, and for so much happens in the course of this book.
And like Urza is saying, I liked that the old characters didn't take center stage in this. That
Yes.
happens so often when old fan favorites are brought back. And I've talked about that before,
Mhm.
in not at some point in talking about
Yes.
First Law, just that like unlike Star Wars, where just because you can utilize those old characters and they can add an interesting flavor to what's going on and add context, but that when it's not like when Galactus shows up, oh, it's Galactus' book now. Like it's very much the new cast. Like he's passed the torch to the new characters and the other old characters that you recognize. It's fun to have them. It's interesting to have them, but they don't overshadow anything.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like, this is not their story. It's the story of the new characters, and yeah, I think
And again, it
just
doesn't feel like
beautifully done.
the new characters are just like like a lot of TV shows will do like a flashback for the parents or something, and then the
Mhm.
the actors who are playing the kids will play their parents for like the flashback scene. So like in the similar sense, like you could do a second generation story where it's like, oh, okay, well they're all just like mini versions of their parents now. It's not like Savine is like, well, she's the girl Glocta, and
Mhm.
then Orso is like, well, he's just like the born into privilege. Just it's not like they're all just like
No.
the next gen copies of their parents. Like they are also very much their own characters.
Yes, 100%, which I think is really interesting.
Matt F says, "Who is the hero of the story? Who did you root for? Does Abercrombie have heroes and villains?"
Hmm.
I mean, I know who the hero of the story is for me because he's my favorite character in this trilogy. But I don't actually think there are heroes and villains. But
No, and I think that's the entire point, right? And sometimes the
although,
people that you're rooting for might not be people who always do good things.
however, without spoilers, it's
Mhm.
not the last chapter, but it's like the second or third to last chapter in Wisdom of Crowns is called The Villain.
Mm.
And there is a conversation about whether or not someone is the villain.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is
Yeah.
actually. Yeah, it's called The Villain.
Yeah. We've got some, people saying Orso is
Yes,
the only good
Orso,
one.
Team Orso.
Vic, Team Vic,
Mm.
interesting. I mean, or anti-hero maybe for Vic, I don't know. A lot of anti-heroes, honestly. Orso.
Vic is also a character that is more so than any of the other characters is more of a reader insert, where like it is the point of view that the reader is most likely to have on things, where they
Hmm.
have some perspective on what the world was like before. She kind of knows some of the characters from before. She has a view of the world where everyone is kind of corrupt and is trying to make her own way. She's the one that is handed surprise revelations. She's the one that is handed information. Like, not that she is 100% a reader insert, but like if anyone is, Vic is.
Hmm. Yeah, I could see that. Vic's an interesting character and goes on has quite a journey through the course
Who
of these
doesn't?
books. Who doesn't? Who doesn't indeed? Okay.
Yeah, I
Okay, we
mean,
have someone saying there are definitely some villains.
yeah, I arguably they're all villains. um,
Yeah, it's
but I mean, that's the nature of First Law. I don't think
mhm,
he's ever written a
yeah,
story with a hero and a villain,
yeah,
or he just has protagonists.
right,
That's it.
correct. Urza is saying, I like how everyone hates Giselle the most in the first trilogy when he is objectively the goodest character. Yes. Well, and I think we've talked about this before, that what is so intriguing about reading these books is sometimes the person you hate the most is not the person who does the most objectively bad things, but the person who is most irritating.
Well, also the one that like what I always say is that it's the evil you know.
Right.
Whereas like a lot of the other things are like these are objectively more evil things to be killing, to be torturing, whatever. But like that's not hopefully most of us reading these books have not encountered those things in real life. If we have, it is the exception and not the rule. Most of us have met an asshole like Giselle. Like
Mhm.
most of us have met somebody who's like very like self-important and aggravating and arrogant, and it's that little kind of everyday evil that just like bothers you so much more because you're like, I have personal experience with this and I'm very irritated with this. It's a very mundane kind of quote unquote evil, and it's not even
Yeah.
evil. Whereas like, again, like a berserker, a torturer, these kinds of things, you're like, I mean, I read about that in books, but I mean, I can't really like, I don't personally feel any kind of way
Right.
about that.
Right. Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah.
Yes, as Urza says,
I thought
Giselle was a
Giselle
douche,
was
the rest of them are
listen, I
torturers.
yeah. I found Giselle entertaining when everybody else hated him, and then eventually I think grew to love him, but I think that character arc is a good one. The villain in Age of Madness is probably capitalism. Arguably. Maybe. Maybe. Mhm. Can we talk spoilers yet? We're at 22 minutes.
It's your show.
It's
Do
our
you want to talk
show.
about spoilers?
Yeah, let's talk spoilers. Okay, so spoilers. Wow, there were some twists I did not see coming, which was really fun
Yeah.
to
In that
read.
sense, I mean, um, which would you say was more of like a oh wow, mind blown, last argument of kings or wisdom of crowds?
Mm,
Because both of them I think are very good at like having taken you through a
yeah.
trilogy and then just like wham, end it with
Uh-huh.
a thing you're like, what?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, my feeling would be to say this, but I don't know if it's just recency bias because I've read it for the first time more recently, whereas I read Last Argument of Kings for the first time, 2 years ago, now almost 2 years ago. So, but did not expect Glokta to have been sort of the puppet master behind everything, and there were several scenes with that at the end that and what is her name? The maidservant friend,
Zuri.
Zuri? That was so interesting. I was wondering what was up with her because there were hints of things that there was something weird about her, and I was like, "What? What is the deal with Zuri?" But I had no idea, and so when it's revealed the truth, I was like, "What? Oh, okay, that's the deal." Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've so like as to Last Argument of Kings versus Wisdom of Crowds. Personally, I think that um Last Argument of Kings is narratively more shocking, and Wisdom of Crowds is more like emotionally shocking, if that makes sense. Where I feel
Yes.
like the reveals are like they affect me emotionally more so than Last Argument of Kings did, but it wasn't nearly as shocking, as surprising as like I did not see this coming as Last Argument of Kings is.
I can absolutely see that. Whereas this one is more about characters. Well, or
Well, which
like
is why I also like to back to my original point that like this is why Wisdom of Crowds is why I'm like really you should read it in order, because like
yeah,
it is the emotional impact of the end of this book. It's not a plot impact. It's like it's you
right.
have to have known Glocta's history in the first trilogy to really get why he's doing what he's doing. Like not
Yeah,
that you can't get it at all, but like you don't really get it.
yeah.
And why like the fact that Savine is like you decided like defeat Baez by becoming Baez. Like how much
Mhm.
harder that hits if you've read the First Law trilogy.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with that, actually, yes. Listen, Stephanie says, "The way my jaw dropped when the reveal happened at the end of Wisdom of Crowds." Same, same, same. My jaw also dropped.
So for me, like as soon as like Galacta just like pissed off and walked away from the plot in
Yeah,
Trouble with Peace was like, guess I'm retired now, bye. I was like, I don't know what he's doing, but he's doing something. So like I didn't guess that he was the Weaver, but I was like,
mhm.
there's no way he just was like, bye. I'm
Right,
done with being in the story now. I was like, no way. He's doing something. I don't know what he's doing, but he's doing something.
right. I just wasn't expecting that was what it was gonna be. Terrible first law opinion. Cameron says, "My favorite terrible first law opinion is that Pike would have been a better weaver." That
Well, he kind
ah,
of he was deputized Weaver.
the pseudo weaver. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's uh
As to Cameron's point about the terrible opinion that Pike would be a better Weaver, I'm not sure in what respect you mean that specifically. If you mean like emotionally and like in that sense, being like it would just be like affect you more that he is in that sense. But like for me, realistically, to be able to pull off being the Weaver, it would have to be Glocta because like only Glocta is in a
yeah.
position of power. So like the only way that he truly could be the Weaver is if Glocta got bumped off screen in between books and Pike was the Archlector, then he would
Mhm.
be in a position to actually do that. But like realistically, to be able to do this, it would have to be the Archlector, which is Glocta.
Yeah, which makes sense. And I've gotta say, I found it very satisfying to have Glokta kinda pulling all the strings at the end. I was like, "Yeah."
Well, and this is where also again, this is why I say you should read it in order because there's so many scenes that are a parallel or an echo of the past. Like when Vic is getting her like "This is the way the world works" chat from Glocta, it's like directly mirroring the scene where Baez is doing the same for Glocta, and he's getting a "Here, this is how the world works" chat, and "Do you want to be in charge?" And where Glocta was like, "I guess I will be," Vic was like, "No, I'm not. Good, good day, sir."
She just left,
So
yeah,
I feel
which
like
good
that
good
scene
for
again,
her.
like not that it's I mean, it's still a great scene for that character and for the specific situation. You don't have to know that it's mirroring a previous scene. But if you do know that it's mirroring a previous scene, it just is all the more rich for that.
But also the reverse could be true, right? Where you read it and you know it's mirroring a future scene and you see the difference. I'm just saying.
But of course, by then, like if you are reading the original First Law trilogy after reading this, you'll
Mhm.
not be surprised that Baez is behind everything. Like that shock has been ruined for you. So you'll never have been shocked by it, and you won't have had the emotional impact of the later trilogy because you weren't already previously shocked by the
Yeah,
revelations of the original trilogy.
yeah.
So you've just like ruined your emotional experience for both by doing it that way.
But tell
Nope,
us how
yeah,
you
Jenny wouldn't
really
do it this way.
feel about
Sorry.
reading order of the first law, Leah.
Look, I'm saying these are great books. So, like, you can't really, in my opinion, if you are inclined to like this writing style, you won't have a bad experience either
Right.
way. But the far superior experience is in publication order.
Okay, okay. So we have a comment saying the big flaw is Calder and Baez falling for Rika's ploy. Thoughts on this?
Um, I guess I have to. I'm wondering why you think that that's a flaw. If it's that it's not believable that they would fall for it. Um, in the case of Calder, I wonder why you if it's like Baez, sees all and knows all, and therefore he shouldn't fall for it. If that's, I mean, to me, it was quite believable.
Yeah, I mean, I found it believable, but yeah. The mirroring of Savine and Leo in the closed council room of Giselle and Glocta, chef's kiss. Okay.
So yeah, that was a comment from Radella. I hope
From
I'm
Radella,
pronouncing that
yeah.
correctly. So I think what you're talking about is like, so when Giselle thinks that he's, he's king and that he's in charge now, and he finds when he goes into the council room, and Glock is like, yeah, no, you don't, you're not in charge of anything. It's actually, it doesn't matter what you say. I think that's what you're talking about, mirroring, where like Savine and Leo are in the council room, and Leo's like, this is how it's gonna be, and
Oh,
he's
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
spitting mad.
Oh, which was so
Um,
satisfying because, like, I kind of hated Leo by that point in the book.
I mean, I should so hope so. He's the
Oh
worst.
my god. I Yeah, I also find it so interesting that, his wife put together before he even admitted to himself the fact that he was gay. He's just so
Everyone put that together before Leo did.
oh, his internalized homophobia is so bad. Yeah, it's, it's just hilarious. I love so many of the things Abercrombie did with this book. I just think it's really good.
Cameron says,
Cameron oh, read yeah.
oh, and Cameron says Calder challenged the mad lad Black Dow to a duel in the circle, so he isn't the mastermind we think he is, and Baez is just too cocky. I mean, that's generally how I feel about it. This is to do with like them falling for Ricka's ploy. That like that's kind of a lot of the what he's doing in this book, where female characters are a lot more centered in this trilogy, but a lot of it is like dudes just being too cocky, and like the fact that like Savine is able to take control after the great change, like it's,
Mhm.
I mean, because Leo's out here blustering and like that's how it should be and men are in charge, and he's just like, they just make assumptions based on that. And
Yeah.
meantime, people like Rika and Savine are like, yeah, we're just gonna take care of it ourselves, like off,
Yeah.
we're just gonna handle it, and you're not gonna see it coming because you're just out here thinking you're in charge and you're not. So
Yeah. It's like, "Sorry, no, that's not how things are gonna go." I thought it was really funny, the scene where I don't remember exactly what happened, but Savine sort of thinks to herself, "Oh, I guess, like, they always say you end up marrying your father," and she never thought she would, but then
I mean, like from Trouble with Peace, as soon as like Leo started to be, when he like had his leg first hurt, I was like, are we doing this? Where like Savine was pregnant, had to rush into a marriage to a guy that she wasn't actually in love with, and the guy that she was marrying is now crippled. And I was like,
yeah,
are we doing this?
yeah.
But yeah,
Repeating
Nicole
history.
says one of my favorite scenes in all of First Law, the stairs mirroring with Glockta and Leo. I mean, yeah, the click tap pain basically that we get,
Yes.
where
Yep.
it's, if you needed confirmation that Leo is the new Glockta. Except, I mean, if you
Except
told me
not.
before, I was like, if you had told me that a character would kind of like follow the trajectory of Glockta and become kind of like a reincarnation of Glockta, and that would be the character I hate most, I'd be like, nah.
Yeah.
But you did
You
it.
did
You
it.
made me hate
Did
him.
it. In fact, yes. Radella says Leo's
Yeah.
racism is also awful. Yeah. Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's also, I mean, this is one of the things where I always give Abercrombie credit for, because like it's also not cartoonish. Like that's why you hate Leo, is because like when you're in Leo's head and he's thinking these things, like you're like, yeah, I know that guy, and I've heard this opinion, and it's spoken with the same confidence, and like that's just good sense attitude that Leo has, and that it's not like he's not like a mustache twirling like saying like what he says is horrifying because of how mundane and how common it is to hear that kind of an opinion.
Mhm. Yeah. I also really liked the sort of final ending where Baez is regrouping, raising new children in the arts of finance and war.
Yeah.
The two great things to control the world and will make a comeback. Well, and that's the thing. Baez is immortal, basically.
Yeah, I was gonna say like you
So,
can beat Baez this go around, but like you can win the battle, but he's always gonna win the war.
yeah. Yeah.
It's just gonna
I
take him a minute.
I guess the ending was not what I was not well, I guess it was kind of what I predicted, wasn't it? in some ways. Well, yes and
You
no.
predicted the rise of capitalism.
Well, yeah, like the rise of capitalism and like either a democracy or a more constitutional monarchy. But I thought Baez would still be pulling the strings, which wasn't exactly right. But I feel like I was like in the ballpark of like where we ended.
Did you think that who did you think the Weaver was, since you didn't guess that it was Glock? Did you have a guess for who it was?
I thought it was Baez,
Yeah, I'm
maybe.
sure. I'm sure I played with the idea. I was like, well, he could be deciding monarchy doesn't work anymore, so
Like, let's tear
you
it all
know.
down and do something different. Yeah, I thought
But as
maybe
soon
it
as they
was.
started
I don't
burning
know.
down Valentin Balk, you're like, he's not in
Yeah,
charge
it
of
was
this.
not.
There's no
Yeah,
way he's in charge of this.
right. Yeah, because he's not doing that. I wasn't really sure what to think, but I certainly didn't think of it being Glocta. So Ursa says the ending was unsatisfying to me. It was very satisfying to me. I found it to be a
I mean, it was upsetting to me because Orso is dead. No one has said it yet. Orso is dead. And
yeah.
not only is he dead, it becomes because at first, you're kind of like, oh man. I mean, like there's some comments here from people about like what could have gone differently and things would have
Mhm.
gone differently. But the thing is, Glocta's plan from the beginning requires the offing of Orso. Like
Yeah.
he was a goner from go. So like knowing that it's not like, oh, if only, it's like, no, maybe
No.
Leo's the one that did it, but if Leo hadn't, Galacta would have made sure someone did.
Somebody had to because you had to tie up that loose end, especially because of the hereditary stuff. Yeah, it kind of had to happen. It's sad though.
Or we could have just let Savine and Orso get married and just reign as the most clever queen with the kindest king, and there would be an era of peace and prosperity in the land. Happily
Mhm.
ever after.
And inbreeding, yeah, no, we
What, the
can't.
royals inbreed anyway.
Oh gosh, no.
It doesn't matter. Who is to say those kids aren't his anyway?
It is, I will say, it is something that he could have me somewhat rooting for them
To
because
the very end.
yeah, because normally there's no way. I'm like, "Oh, hell no. I am not shipping an incest plotline." The fact that I was like,
That's why I
"Oh,
always say
no."
that with Abercrombie books, the real grimdark is the truths you learn about yourself along the way.
I didn't really
And I'm
want them
rooting now for a
together, but I
torturer
was
and for
like,
incest.
I wish it was possible, you
Yep.
know? Somebody said Rodella says, "Yes, Savine and Orso would have been awesome."
Yep.
Well,
They're
and
only half
also,
siblings.
much like somebody said earlier, if only Leo had just been with his best friend, you know? Like, just you could have been happy. But no,
Yep.
no. It's like people get in their own way so
Yep.
much.
So
Mhm.
much.
Yep. Do people think Baez murdered Giselle? Hmm.
I personally, I think Rodella is referring to the fact that we have Giselle, who seems to be in good health, suddenly die in the
Suddenly
end
die.
of
Like
a little cave.
something happened.
So yeah, I think I shouldn't speak for everyone, but I think everyone agrees that he did not die of natural causes. I imagine that it would be the Weaver, maybe not directly, not that Galacta personally went over and did it, but I mean, the plan he had necessitated this point of uncertainty, and for like the grandkids, or I mean for Savine to be in line, we would have to
Mhm.
like move up the timeline on things. And if he's got the country on a precipice of like boiling over into revolution, what better than to have the head of state be uncertain? Any transition of power is going to make it more unstable for a period of time, and he's
Right.
aiming for a period of instability, of like transitioning power. So because they were like ready to go on revolution, now's the time. So I feel like I don't know what benefit Baez would have, like why Baez would choose to do that. I don't see how that would benefit him.
Yeah. I mean, that's fair. Ah, that's kinda sad. Maybe that's why it wasn't made explicit, Glocta having Giselle killed. Oh, gosh.
Oh yeah, because
Cameron
that's the worst thing that Glocta's ever done. If
I
you
know.
recall, Glocta hated Giselle at all times during the First Law trilogy.
Yeah, I mean, fair. Fair enough. Just because he grew on us doesn't mean he grew on everybody. Urza thinks Baez arranged it.
So like I would fully believe that Baez would do something like that. It's just in that particular time. Like, feel free to convince me. I'm not like
Mhm.
married to the idea that the Weaver did it. But I just, out of who benefits from Giselle's death and at that point in history, I really only see a benefit to the side of the Weaver. I don't
Yeah.
see a benefit to Baez. But convince me, if you will. I'd be happy to think that Glokta didn't have a hand in. I mean, he even says at one point, when he's explaining the way of the world, I think it's to Vic, not to Savine, when he's like, believe it or not, me and Giselle, like, we tried to do some good, but it was impossible to do any good because Baez is the one that holds the strings and is the one in charge.
I think it makes sense. Rodella says, I thought Baez might have found Giselle was fighting back too much and thought Orzo would be more pliant.
Possible,
Maybe,
possible.
maybe. And maybe we'll never know. Maybe that's part of the
We'll
point.
just go ask Abercrombie.
or do that. Yep. Urza
All
is
right.
convinced the Glokta did it side. Okay. Success.
Maybe it was the Styrians and neither Baez nor Glokta had anything to do with it.
Maybe.
Maybe what's his name? You know, Eater man who's on his own side who hates Baez. What's his name?
Oh, yes.
Shanked showed up and
Shanked.
killed the king because he's like, you're Baez's man, I'm killing you.
Right. That's 100%. Yeah. Yeah.
Very possible.
That whole scene was wild though, having the eaters. I just that whole thing just like blew my mind. Honestly, I was
Which I
like,
love because I mean, like, there is so little
what?
magic. There's so little magic in First Law and especially in this new trilogy, other than Rico's Long
Yeah.
Eye. But
Yeah.
like the way that Savine is like that description of like that moment when like the sturdy, unshakable sound built on reason world that you think you're functioning in, and then you see what is beneath it, and you realize that it's all on shifting sand, and you have actually no idea how the world works. You're like, what is happening right now?
Well, and the fact that like her one friend turns
I
out
love the
to be
moment when
an
she's like,
eater.
"So who is your scripture teacher?" And she's like, "I think you know."
Oof. Yeah, that scene was epic. Um other things to talk about with this.
I mean, okay, Orso, not only I would have been sad about him dying, because of
Yeah.
course I would have been sad, but the fact that he went out with jokes just gets me like waterworks. Like the fact that
I loved it. I loved that he sort of sacrificed himself. Like, I don't know, I thought it was great. I
I mean,
like
even
that
the
kind of
whole time
ending.
the revolution was going on, he was like, yeah, I guess I should confess. I guess I should give myself up, right? That's the right thing to do. And he's at one point he's like, I was kind of hoping people would try to talk him out of it, but they didn't. So I mean, I guess I will give myself up.
Yeah.
And like his jokes throughout when he's in captivity and being like referring to the people guarding him as his staff and like acting like he's in the lap of luxury, even though he's very much not. And like even when he and Savine are being brought up, I like too that instead of just going for this is the French Revolution, they're going to invent a guillotine. They
Mhm.
invented their own revolutionary way of killing people, dropping them
Yeah.
off a tower, which I think was a very impactful, the imagery of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, when he and Savine are being brought up there and they haven't spoken to each other since like before everything has happened, and he's like making jokes and she's like, are you joking right now? Are you making jokes right now? And he's like, kind of think it's my last opportunity, don't you? And like that's just his whole vibe. And so even as he's going up, and the fact that, so like the first time you see Orso, I don't know if you caught this, the very first time you meet Orso in A Little Hatred, the chapter is called A Little Public Hanging, and the chapter in which he dies is A Little Private Hanging.
Oh.
And the first time you meet
Oh.
him, he's like, I hate hangings. Like, that's like the first thing that you ever see. And he's like, getting drunk and high at a hanging. And he's like, I could put a stop to this. I should put a stop to this. I don't know this person. Do they just, and they're already dead. Oh, well, whatever. Like, that's when you first meet him. And now he's,
Wow. Okay. It's like these are the things you would notice on a reread. That's fascinating.
and then
Mhm.
his last words to Leo are, how's the leg?
How's the leg?
Oh,
I'm
gets
sure
me every
Leo
time.
hated. Oh my god. Yep. Yeah, no, I really liked him too, but I liked the way that he died. You know what I mean? Like I appreciated that he I don't know. It's like he saw the role
I
he
feel like out
needed
of
to play.
everyone in these books, the person that came out of it like with some dignity is Orso.
Yep.
Even
Despite
though
them trying
arguably
to take it away.
he was like a public embarrassment according to like his reputation, but he's the only one that had like dignity.
Honestly, yeah. Cameron says really shows his pride in a cool, unique way. Loved it. I agree. Rodella says, I love that Orso's flight to Varenus? I don't was lying on a barge going slowly down a canal.
I think he
Yes.
says something about that too, how he imagined running away being like a rushed affair, but it's
Yeah.
actually quite slow.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of humor in these books for as, intense
Well, and
as they can
who,
be.
like a cockroach, survives it all? Clover. Jonas Clover
Of
is
course.
like knocking on Baez's door, ready to start this whole cycle all over again.
Great. Great. Great.
Sour Nightfall is dead. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy.
Mm-hmm.
I was not sorry to see him go.
Yeah. Yeah. And we haven't really talked about Ricka.
I was gonna say, like, so I asked you in the beginning with her vision. So who do you think? What does this mean? And I
Mm-hmm.
liked that we got this scene where she's like, "Well, I had this vision,"
Yeah.
and Orso's helping. Oh, okay, so that's me, and that's
Mm-hmm.
you, and or whatever. And it's like, so who's the owl? It's Ricka. Did you
Yep.
guess that the owl would be Ricka?
No.
Ricka didn't guess that the owl would be Ricka.
No. Yeah. That was sad, honestly. I was like, no.
Ricka's sad about it, but as
I
a
know.
Cernifale would say, you have to make of your heart a stone. Ruthlessness is a quality much beloved of the moon.
She learned her lessons well, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Rodella says, I wonder what happened to Tunny as Hildy made it to Baez.
Yeah, well, I was gonna
Oh.
say, like, so I loved Hildy's and Orso's relationship and how funny and adorable that was from the beginning. But then, yeah, at the end, to see that Hildy is with Baez, I mean, it made me happy too to think that we might see her in future books, even if Orso is gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have to say, I would be delighted to see more of Jonas Clover, because now that we don't have Nicomo Casca anymore, we need some comic relief, and
Indeed.
Jonas Clover is very funny.
Oh
But yeah,
my
we have a
goodness.
whole new vision that was
Oh yeah,
provided
you
to
were
us
gonna do
by
a
Ricka.
dramatic reading of the new vision.
It's quite long, her
Is
vision.
it?
It's much longer than it's like this whole first page.
Oh geez.
So I'll read a bit,
Okay.
but like we can guess. I mean, some parts of it are very clear who they are.
Okay.
So in the blackness of the night, the long eye opened, and she saw it all. She saw a bald weaver, and the work on his loom was all in ruins, a million threads hanging severed. But he was stitching it back together, patience, patience, and smiling as he worked. Baez. He put out his hands, and one fell on the head of a black-haired boy, and the other on the head of a blonde-haired girl. Called her son and Hildy. She saw the girl become a laughing woman, flashing lenses on her eyes, a tall hat perched on her golden curls, and the hat belched smoke, spat ash, blotted out the bleeding sun, and cast the world into twilight. She blew a kiss, and the kiss became a coin, 1,000 coins, 1,000,000 golden chains. She offered her hand, and the fingers became iron rails, and the rails reached across the sea and made the cage that Stour had forged, and the whole north was inside. Like, he's got to write more books, right?
Yeah.
She saw the black-haired boy become a black-haired man, and he sat on a hill of bones in a circle of fire with a gray sword across his knees, a gray sword never sheathed, a gray sword marked with one silver letter. His scarred mouth spoke, but his words were drops of blood that made a stream, that became a river, that became a sea, that broke upon the beaches of the north, a tide of blood, a flood whose red waters would not recede.
Yeah. Well,
So,
and
I
that's
feel like
the
it's gonna be
thing.
dark times.
Yeah, no kidding. But I mean, to me, that reads as like industrialization, capitalism, and war.
All led by Baez. Baez is like, fine, machine of industry, let's go. Great change? I'm all about that. Let's go.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean,
Yeah.
Bias has been pretty progressive from the beginning. That's why he did banking. He was like,
Mhm.
yeah, magic is all well and good, but it's a lot more effective controlling people via
Money.
banking.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Whew. Man. I would read more in this world, but we'll see.
I mean,
See what it gives us.
I think he will, right? Because
Mhm.
it's clear that like his first love is the first law. That's why he keeps
Yeah.
coming back to it. And
Yeah.
then he plays in other sandboxes and is like, okay, well, let's get back to first law.
Yeah. Urza says the Desert Kingdom fell during the trilogies.
Well, also the part of this that I didn't get to, the part of the vision, which is maybe the most interesting part for a
Oh,
future
and the
book.
prophet got killed.
Um, so she sees more darkness, more bleeding, plague of worms, blah blah blah. And in the darkness she saw a bald weaver, and in his eye she saw a burning stone, and in the burning stone she saw a circle of runes, and in the circle of runes she saw a black door, and beyond the door a figure rose from the seething sea, a figure made of blinding light, and his feet left smoldering footsteps in the shingle, and he spoke in thunder, "I am returned." So we might easily see a resurgence of magic and the return
Hmm.
of, who do we think? Canadius? Kalul? Who's returning?
I don't know. Interesting. Need him to write more short stories about her. Oh, about Pharaoh. Yeah, sure. Yeah, Glustr
Glystrad,
Glystrad.
another contender
Mhm.
for who's returning.
Rodella says it's got to be Glustrad, surely. Perhaps.
Could be, who
Could
knows?
be. Hmm. Well, is that Baez's master?
We don't know until he writes more books. Which he's
Mm,
got to do. As soon as he's done with
yep.
his little side project right now.
His little side project. Listen, maybe the side project will become the new favorite thing. You never know.
I doubt that I will ever like it more than First Law, but I very much hope to enjoy it a great deal.
Well, all right. We are at 52 minutes. So, any final thoughts on this before we move into our On My Radar upcoming book releases segment?
It's so good. It's great. It's perfect. Please read it in publication order.
It is really, really fantastic. So, I was very much a fan. And I'm so glad we did this all
I'm
year.
always
So for those
glad
who joined us,
of a reason to read First
but I'm
Law.
happy that I finally finished. I feel so accomplished the amount of books and series I've read with you this year, because normally I'm not great at finishing long series because I get sidetracked with other
And this is
things.
the best one that you've finished. Yes.
Yeah, this year the best long series. Yeah, I mean it's certainly better than the other one we're reading.
Is Wisdom of Crowds a 6-star book?
It is.
Yes, I knew it.
Which
And
for
yes,
those
as
listening
Nicole
is it's
says,
what I give to like my favorites of the year. Yeah. And as Nicole says, time to start
time to
again.
start again.
Yeah, no, this has been really fun. So thank you to everybody for joining us. And we are going to talk a little bit about recent and upcoming book releases that we're excited about in sci-fi and fantasy. New change for this, by the way, as we're heading into the new year. Beginning with this, we're trying out more of the live shows. I think this went pretty well, which is great. Thank you all for joining us. And the other change is we're going to start doing 2 episodes a month. This had been every 2 weeks, but coming in 2023, we're going to be doing 2 episodes a month. There'll be one sci-fi fantasy episode with me and Leanna, one romance episode with me and Izzy. And for our new releases, we're going to separate it out where the sci-fi fantasy releases for that month will all go in the sci-fi fantasy episode, and the romance releases for the month will go in the romance episode, since we know we have like some split
Never the twain
audiences.
shall meet.
Every once in a while you'll get all 3 of us on on an episode. Like at the end of December, you'll get that, which will be
The
fun.
closest to romance you get from me is shipping Orso and Savine.
Yeah. The most romance of romance. And if, of course, if you appreciate if you enjoy the podcast, we do appreciate if you take a moment to rate and review us so we can reach more listeners. Subscribe to us on YouTube. If you haven't already, it's always a fun way to interact, especially as we're going to be doing more actual live episodes. And if you're interested in getting early access to episodes as well as exclusive bonus content with every episode, consider supporting us on our Patreon, which is linked in the show notes or in the video description down below. And I believe for today's episode, our bonus content is going to be discussing Abercrombie's upcoming book and also fan casting this trilogy that
The
we
Age
just
of
finished
Madness.
reading, Age of Madness trilogy. So it should be fun. So join us over there. Huge thanks to all of our supporting patrons, including our World Expander patron, Trina. You all make what we do possible. Thank you. And for books, there's not a lot because
I
December is
have
kind
two.
of, oh, good. And I bet I know what one of them is.
Because Urza already said it.
Oh, no, I didn't have that one. Tell me about this one.
Ashes of Man by Christopher Rocchio is the next book in the Sun Eater series. Originally, Kingdoms of Death came out earlier this year because this book was supposed to be one book, but it got split into Kingdoms of Death and Ashes of Man. So this is kind of like the second half of the book that got split. So that's coming out in December. And then I also have a book that came out already in the UK, but for some reason is coming out here much later in December. And that is The Cuckoo, the conclusion to the Under the Northern Sky series by Leo Carew. The Cuckoo is coming out December 6th.
Yes, that one I did know you were going to talk about. So yay! And then I found a couple to mention. December 6th, we're also getting The Ivory Tomb by Melissa Caruso. This is the third book of the Obsidian Tower fantasy series. I have not actually read this series, but I've heard good things about it. So if you were been reading it and you've been waiting for the finale, it's coming out on December 6th. And then December 12th, we're getting Monstrous Book 2 by Marjorie Liu. So if you've been waiting for the book-sized bind-ups, I have it pre-ordered. It's a great fantasy graphic novel series with really interesting world building. And that's it. There's not a whole lot.
Oh,
January publishing will pick up more.
I had forgotten about this, but Nicole kindly reminded me.
Ah.
City of Last Chances by Adrian Tchaikovsky. If you I luckily have been able to like contact someone who's subscribed to Goldsboro special editions because the Goldsboro edition of City of Last Chances is stunning. But also, you could just read the book, get it on Kindle, get it from your library. You don't have to get the gorgeous one, but also the gorgeous one is so gorgeous.
They do have some really, really beautiful ones. Someone's saying we should read Sun Eater. Yes, I read the first one. I liked it. At some point, I want to continue with the series.
Well, the fifth one is coming out now. So
yeah. So
get on
one
it.
of these days. Yeah, no kidding. Yes, monstrous. And for anybody who hasn't already heard, in 2023, for our sci-fi fantasy stuff, me and Leanna will be doing a Witcher read-along. So you can look forward to that. It's going to be fun. And I think I have the order. I think we're starting with January, The Last Wish.
Yeah, so I'll probably do a video like with a bunch of like read-alongs and things happening, so I'll talk about it there.
Yeah.
But our reading order for Witcher will be The Last Wish, Sword of Destiny, then the main series, so starting with Blood of Elves through Lady of the Lake, and then at the end of all that, then we'll read Season of Storms.
Yes, and I think we're taking a break somewhere in there. I don't remember.
I think so. The first two, Last Wish and Sword of Destiny, are kind of short story bind-ups. They're not really short stories, but it's more of like short story bind-ups.
Yeah.
So we're gonna do those two, take a break.
January,
do the
February.
main series, like Blood of Elves, Lady of the Lake, and then take a break and then do Season of Storms.
Yes. So there you go. If you're gonna read along with us, that is the plan for 2023. It's going to be fun. And
she's guaranteeing it.
Yep. And I will be back in 2 weeks for another actual live show, which is exciting. It is already prepped and ready to go. It's going to be midday, back with Izzy November 29th at 1 p.m. Eastern time to discuss the current slate of Netflix holiday movies. So if you are a fan of holiday movies,
I'm
We'll
just
be
really looking
discussing 3
forward
of them.
to ending every single Witcher live show with, an invitation to toss a coin to the Patreon. It's gonna be a good
Perfect.
time.
Yes, I
We
love
could
it,
even
I love
sing
it.
it.
We we could. Whew. Yeah, so thank you everybody for joining us. It's been really fun. This has been Chapter 3 Podcast. We're your hosts, Bethany and Leanna. You can follow us as always on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Not that we post that frequently. We probably should post more than we do. But you can also find us on our individual YouTube channels, and the next episode will be available in 2 weeks. This episode's bonus content will be available to patrons in the next few days. Thanks for listening.